Hello everyone, today I'm here to talk about Mrs. March by Virginia Feito. I learned about this book when I listened to a podcast called Wicked Words. The host of that is Kate Winkler Dawson. For a second I was like, oh my gosh, I remember her full name. And it is a really interesting podcast. She basically just talks to authors about their novels. They're either usually true crime or crime related in some way, and I find it super fascinating. I really like it. I love to hear about books that I could potentially read or things like that, so I found it very interesting. I was excited about this book. I liked some of the aspects they talked about it. It is basically about a housewife whose husband is a very famous author, and she thinks that while he was out hunting with a friend in, some faraway place at that friend's cabin, that he murdered someone. So it sounds really exciting. It sounds really interesting. Sorry, I think the lighting just changed. It's really hot outside right now where I live, so I'm trying to keep the blinds closed, but then sometimes the sun shining right in my window still affects the lighting. So sorry. Anyway, back to the book. It sounds really interesting, right? This woman suspects that her husband has murdered someone. It wasn't. I'm sorry. To me, it was very, very dull, and there were moments when it would get really exciting, like this woman's paranoia was building, she was hallucinating and seeing things, and then the next chapter she'd just be buying groceries. And the payoff was not worth the long wait of that book, and like I said, just the dullness. It takes, I don't even know, half of the book at least for her to even suspect that her husband murdered this person, and then she goes to the town where it happened. But once again, nothing ever really happens. Like I said, there were little spikes throughout the book where she was getting crazy and I was like, oh, now we're getting interesting. But then it would just plummet again, which is sad because I really wanted to like this book. Like I said, there were aspects that I thought were interesting that I heard about in the podcast. For example, she only is Mrs. March, so she's always connected to her husband, George. She does not have a name. And I really like when authors do that and do it well. Like, for example, in the book Rebecca, if you have ever read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, you know that the narrator of the book is never mentioned, but her husband's ex-wife, Rebecca, is. And you never know the main character's name, but Rebecca's name you always know. And I really, really liked that. It worked really well for the power of Rebecca still haunting the family. And this book, I thought it was okay, but honestly I thought it was kind of weird because it'd be like, Miss March went out to go get groceries. Miss March talked to her son. I just feel like it wasn't as effective as it could have been if the book had been interesting enough. The thing was, I kept reading it hoping that it would get more interesting, that once she was like, yes, my husband did murder this girl, she would go more after him, or she would just get more paranoid. But dull. I'm really sorry. I kept reading it hoping it would get better, and the payoff at the end was not worth it. So unfortunately, even though I'm pretty generous to books, I would not suggest Miss March by Virginia Feito. Sorry, that could obviously just be me. I heard that a lot of people liked it. A lot of people found it interesting. It just, not for me. Too dull, it was almost chaotic. Like I said, there were parts where it would get really interesting, but then those just crashed, and that just kept happening again and again. And I feel like it should have just built a little bit more instead of crashing and coming back and crashing and coming back, and that would have made the book a lot better in my opinion. So I cannot suggest Mrs. March. Geez, I didn't even think of a question either because I wasn't super invested in this book. How about, let's see. I mean, there's a cabin involved. Have you ever been out to a cabin? That is a very good question. I'm honestly trying to remember if I've ever camped. Oh, yes. Yeah, I know. This one time in 6th grade, we did this thing at school called High Trails, where for a week all the 6th graders got to go up and camp in some cabins and do outdoorsy things or learn how to make things or do things with our hands, and fun stuff like that. I got sick the first day, puking, horrible diarrhea, and by the second day, I was gone. Back home. Turns out me and all my brothers had the same stomach bug, and yes, but I was in a cabin for that first night where I was running to the bathroom every hour to go poop. So that is my cabin memory. I'm really trying hard to think if I have stayed in a cabin anywhere else, but none that I can think of at the moment. So that is my one horrible, crappy cabin experience. I hope you have had better cabin experiences than I have. And once again, this was Mrs. March by Virginia Feito. Not my cup of tea, but if that sounds interesting to you, a woman who's slowly going paranoid over her husband maybe killing a girl, but not really, it's just kind of her living her life being weird, then check that out. If not, whatever. Like, subscribe, comment down below. Do you have any crazy cabin experiences, or have you ever camped out in a cabin? What was the experience like? And yeah, like I said, like, subscribe, comment, share if you know people who like books. I try and post every Friday, but it depends on how much time I have to read. Thank you so much for listening, and y'all have a great day.